everybody, it's me, Claire. If you are new, welcome, and if you are returning, welcome back. Today I'm going to be showing you guys everything that I read in August. So this is my August wrap up. I read 6 books in August and I DNF'd 1. I usually don't DNF books, I really don't like doing that, but I decided I would talk about why I DNF'd the book that I did for this month. I read 1,607 pages and my average rating was a 3.91 stars. So all good things. I also read basically all classics this month. Are we surprised? There was only one that wasn't a classic. So yeah. I will get started with my favorite book of the month, which has become a new all-time favorite. And I haven't had a 5-star read in a while. So I was really happy when I read this and I finished it. Well, actually, I was not happy when I finished it because this was a book that I feel like I was so sad finishing this book because I wanted it to go on forever and ever and ever. I loved it so much. And I gave it 5 stars, as I said. But I will talk about it. It was Tess of the Durbville by Thomas Hardy. Holy shit. This book was something else. The fact that I have no words for it still. I still haven't written my review on it and I finished it a few days ago because I'm just blown away. This was my first Thomas Hardy and I read this sort of on a whim, but it was absolutely wonderful. If you guys haven't read this book, please do. It made me cry and it made me laugh. It made me feel every single emotion that my brain is capable of feeling. This book was a roller coaster. It was wonderful and I loved it, and I literally cuddled this book like a baby. I was holding this book like a baby when I finished it because I was crying so hard. It's something else. But if you guys don't know what this book is about, it is about Tess, and her name is Tess Durbville, and one night her father learns that they are descendants of the very prestigious Durbville family. I don't know why I forgot that for a second. The Durbville family. And he sends Tess to this Durbville manor. That part's a little sketchy, the fact that they have that last name. I'm not going to get into that, but she ends up, one of the people who lives there is Alec Durbville, who is this really skeevy guy. He's not skeevy he's only skeevy in the sense that he's constantly lusting after her. And I will say, I'm just going to give a very quick trigger warning when I talk about this book. I will be mentioning and discussing rape and sexual abuse and the implications of that. Nothing crazy explicit, but I just want to say that before I start talking about it. One of the major catalysts of this book is Tess is raped by Alec Durbville, or it is implied that she is raped, and she ends up becoming pregnant, and they are not married. She becomes pregnant and has a child, and the child does end up dying. This is not really spoilers. This happens all within the first 100 pages of the book. That's the major events of the book that really drive the plot. So this is very much a tragedy. Tess, she is manipulated over and over and over by the men in her life, especially Alec Durbville. He pops up a lot in this book. And how this child that she has is born out of wedlock, and how that affects her future relationships, and how it causes a lot of conflict in her life, despite that she really had no say in the matter, that this was forced on her. And meanwhile, we see Alec Durbville as he is sort of allowed to continue a very normal life despite what he did. And this book is really so very emblematic of the double standards between women and men, and how women have to experience the brunt of the pain and how they really get the blunt end of the stick. Is that the saying? I always forget. But Tess is such an interesting, complex character. We see her throughout this book really struggling in her mind between this very calm, composed, sort of nervous young girl, and then this other side of her that's very fiery and kind of very humorous and sarcastic. There's this one part in the book, and it's so funny, where Alec pops up again. That's towards the end, and she is just so mad because he keeps on popping up in her life, and she just smacks him with her leather glove. It's the funniest thing ever, and that made me laugh so hard. I mean, obviously Alec was a very horrible person and a very, like, horrible character, but that part was really funny, and he got what he deserved. Yeah, so I won't spoil anything in this book because a lot happened. So yeah, I actually want to make a whole video on this book and reviewing and talking about this book because it is definitely a new favorite, no doubt about it. If you guys haven't read this book, please do. I really was so surprised by how brilliant Thomas Hardy's writing is, and I think he easily can become one of my new favorite authors, like Fitzgerald. His writing very much reminds me of Fitzgerald, or I guess Fitzgerald reminds me of Thomas Hardy because Thomas Hardy was previous to Fitzgerald's time, but I read more Fitzgerald than I read Thomas Hardy. But anyways, their writing was very similar in the sense that it was so ethereal and beautiful and almost magical in this sense, especially when describing nature, and yet there's such a tragic element to the stories they write, and that's what I loved about this book. The writing, wonderful. The concepts discussed, wonderful and ahead of its time. Thomas Hardy is brilliant and I love him, and this book is amazing and I want to give it a kiss. So yeah, Tess of the Durbvilles, please read it if you haven't. I will be making an entire video on this book in the future. So the next book I'm going to be discussing, I actually really did not feel like getting it down from my shelf because it's like, it would just been kind of a pain, but I will put a picture up of the cover so that you guys can see it. But it is Tender is the Night by F. Scott Fitzgerald. So yes, I read some Fitzgerald this month, as I try to read Fitzgerald every month, whether it's a short story or a novel that I haven't read of his. And Tender is the Night, I gave this 4 stars. I was a bit disappointed with this book. I feel like it could have actually gotten 3.5 stars from me, but there were redeeming qualities about it that made me give it 4 stars. This is I think it's the last novel Fitzgerald actually completed, because the last Tycoon he didn't complete. But Tender is the Night is really about this marriage of Dick Diver and Nicole Diver. It appears to be an incredibly perfect marriage. However, in reality, it is so much more complex than that. So Nicole Diver is struggling severely with a lot of mental health issues. I believe she's diagnosed with schizophrenia. I can't remember. It's not talked about in specifics a ton, but it is very clear, and we see a lot of her episodes, as they're referred to in this book, pretty often. And it's really about how their marriage deteriorates in that sense, and also with Dick and Nicole falling in love with other people and having affairs with other people. It's a very complex marriage. It's a very complex story. It's truly a character study of these two people, Dick and Nicole, and how they affect one another and how other people in their lives impact this marriage, and how one of our other main characters is Rosemary, who Dick has an affair with, and how she kind of intertwines and almost causes the downfall of their marriage, whether she means to or not. So yeah, Tender is the Night. I found myself a bit bored. I felt like the story had not a lot of direction, but in a sense I felt like that was very emblematic of Dick and Nicole's marriage. So I felt like that was actually kind of a good choice on Fitzgerald's side. However, there were some parts that I was just a bit bored with, but the writing was wonderful. Of course, it's F. Scott Fitzgerald. So many wonderful descriptions, so many wonderful concepts discussed. I loved his discussions of mental health and how he didn't really make it seem like Nicole's mental health issues were a burden. They were more of just something that Dick had to deal with. Dick was actually a doctor, and that's how they met, was she was a patient of his. Obviously that has some negative implications which are prevalent throughout this book. But I really, really liked how Nicole was she wasn't seen as just someone who struggled with schizophrenia. She wasn't just seen as a psychiatric patient by anyone in the book. She was seen as this very complex character who just happened to struggle with something like that. And I don't know, I felt like that's a very it was a book I felt like it was ahead of its time in a way. So yeah, this book was written when F. Scott Fitzgerald and Zelda were really struggling, especially Zelda, because she was in and out of psychiatric facilities, and there was this one scene in the book where Nicole is driving, or no, it might be Dick, I can't remember, but I think Nicole, like, takes the wheel and swerves them over a cliff, and Dick is in the car, obviously, and so is Nicole, and so are their children, and they're fine, but they, like, land on a tree or something. But I'm pretty sure that happened to Zelda and Fitzgerald, or at least Zelda tried to do that. And I thought that was really interesting. You can really see how Fitzgerald was struggling with his marriage with Zelda and how the implications that has on a marriage. And also F. Scott Fitzgerald really having a lot of issues with alcohol. We all know he was like a major alcoholic. And that came up a lot. I have never seen that much drinking in an F. Scott Fitzgerald book or story before. They were drinking, everyone was drunk all the time. I mean, I know people were drinking a lot in The Great Gatsby, but when you read this book, you're just like, y'all are drunk all the time. And it's a lot more prevalent, and it's more of a theme in this book rather than in his other works. But yeah, if you guys are interested in more reading out of Scott Fitzgerald, I wouldn't recommend starting with 10 Days the Night, but I did really enjoy it. And it was set primarily in France. I can't remember, I think in Monte Carlo. There's also some scenes in Switzerland and lots of places they were going lots of places. So yeah, 10 Days the Night, I gave that 4 stars. The next book I have is actually a short story, and I absolutely loved this short story. It is The Lottery by Shirley Jackson, and I read this for the Rory Gilmore readathon, which was a few days ago. I absolutely loved the short story. I think probably by the time I'm uploading this, I've already uploaded my readathon blog, so if you guys want to watch that, I'll link it down below. But The Lottery, it's a very short story, but it was so good, and I was expecting something really strange, but I wasn't expecting what happened at the end. I won't give it away because it is so short. It's like you could easily spoil it, but it's about this town that does this annual lottery of sorts, and things are very different than they appear. And I think what Shirley Jackson did so well in this, and what she does so well in a lot of her other books and other works, is she creates these scenes and characters and sets them up in a way that truly juxtaposes what actually happens in the events that unfold. So, like, the events that unfold in the lottery are very strange and a bit horrid. However, the scene setup, it seems very normal and kind of cutesy, I guess, like in a small town way. So yeah, it's a very short story, and if you guys are looking for some Shirley Jackson cool, strange work, I would definitely recommend The Lottery. So the next book I am going to talk about is actually a poetry collection, which I also read for the Rory Gilmore readathon, and that was the Selected Poems of Emily Dickinson. So I've had this for a while, and I was reading, bits and pieces of it, and I never actually read it in its whole, and I really enjoyed it. Emily Dickinson is one of my favorite poets, and I had never finished this book. I just read a lot of her work from like online or other poetry anthologies. So yeah, this really confirmed my love for Emily Dickinson. I gave this 4 stars just because like some of the poems I didn't necessarily connect with. I think it's hard to kind of rate a poetry book or an anthology of poetry just because. But I will go through some of my favorites. I really liked this one. I might actually read it because, okay, so I've been thinking a lot about going to college, and I might be going to college in the United Kingdom, which is far away, and I feel like when I read this, I felt like I really connected with it in a way that I feel like I could really connect with it in the future when I'm at college. And obviously this poem ascends just the surface level of what I'm about to read, but what I read, just my initial thoughts and my initial perception of it really kind of made me smile. I'm gonna read the second stanza. I'm not gonna read the whole thing. To stay the homesick feet upon a foreign shore, haunted by native lands, the while in blue, beloved air. This is the sovereign anguish, this the signal woe. These are the patient laureates whose voices train below. I just really loved that. I thought it was beautiful. And I know that that poem probably goes much deeper besides just yearning for home, but I felt like it's something I feel like I might be able to go back to and read, and I marked it so that I could do that. There were many beautiful poems in this. If you guys haven't read Emily Dickinson, I definitely recommend her. She writes so wonderfully about everything, about nature and love and death, grief, pain. Everything she writes is so beautiful. And oh, actually I do have another one that I want to read because it was really lovely and I loved it. Right. This was about kind of rebelling against tradition, and it was really interesting. I'm just gonna read it. I'm seated. I've stopped being theirs. The name they drop upon my face with water in the country church is finished using now, and they can put it with my dolls, my childhood, and the string of spools. I finished studying too. Baptized before without the choice, but this time consciously of grace unto supremest name. Called to my fold, the crescent dropped, existence whole arc filled up with one small diadem. My second rank too small the first, crowning on my father's breast, a half unconscious queen, but this time adequate, erect, with will to choose or to reject, and I choose just a throne. Emily Dickinson has such a way with words. So yeah, I really love this. It was so beautiful. Oh, my teacher just sent us calming study music. I just got that notification on our Google Classroom. So cute. Okay, sorry. So now I'm gonna move on to my more disappointing reads. These are books that I just kind of had higher expectations for, and they aren't bad by any means, but yeah. So the first one I have is Call Me By Your Name by Osman. This is a book very well known, very iconic, and I'm sad to say I didn't like it as much as I felt like I would have. That was not coherent. I didn't enjoy it as much as I wanted to. This is a book about Elio, who is living in Italy with his family for the summer, and his father takes in an apprentice every summer, and he falls in love with Oliver, his father's apprentice for the summer. And there were definitely a lot of discussions in this book that I really enjoyed. Unique discussions of, the whole idea of call me by your name and feeling so in love with someone and so enthralled with someone that you almost feel like you are both like interconnected in a way. And it was really lovely in a lot of areas. I had some issues with it, and not the ones that I feel like a lot of other people have. I don't really know how I felt about the fact that Elio was 17 and Oliver was in his 20s. I don't know what to say about that. If you guys have opinions on that, please let me know, because I don't know. But it wasn't a huge age difference, but also, I don't know. That wasn't I didn't really have a particular problem with that, but, yeah, anyways. So, one of the things that bothered me about this, and I did talk about this in my last vlog a bit, was Elio was just, he didn't really have a personality, and then when he did, he was just, and in the aspects that were shown of him, he was just sort of rude and, a bit ignorant and insensitive. I feel like, so in particular, Marzia, she says to him, I think you're going to hurt me, and he sleeps with her twice, and then is just like, nope. And I don't know, that really bothered me. I felt like he was just sort of insensitive and just very selfish. And I know that, when you're a teenager, you struggle with your sexuality and you make mistakes, but he was just so conscious of, like, the things he was doing with her and just kind of toying with her, and that just really bothered me for some reason. And I also felt like just in general these characters really did not have a personality, and they were just sort of flat, which took away from the romance for me a lot. Another big thing is Elio just seemed very ungrateful and just so unaware of how privileged he was to be able to live and summer in the Italian countryside and have parents who were so like cool with everything he did. I don't know, he just seemed so oblivious to everything. So, I mean, yeah, that just kind of took away from my enjoyment. I don't think there's any crazy critiques in here. Like, this book was not bad. I didn't love it. And I think I gave it 3.5 stars. So, yeah. So, the next book that I have on this list is A Room with a View by Ian Forrester. I was kind of surprised I didn't like this as much. 2 books about Italy I didn't like. But this is about Lucy Honeychurch, which is a lovely name. I love her name. But she is traveling throughout Italy with her chaperone cousin, Charlotte, and she meets the Emersons, who are a very peculiar family, especially in this time period, and kind of sort of outspoken, especially Mr. Emerson. And she sort of falls in love with George Emerson, who was the son of Mr. Emerson, and she has a hard time suppressing these feelings. So it's a romance in itself, but it's also a discussion of Edwardian society, because a lot of this book is having to do with how these lives interconnect when they return to England. And she ends up being engaged to Cecil, I forgot his last name, Cecil, but he's a very uptight man, and just like it was very clear Lucy and him were not right for each other, but she was staying with him and, you know, engaged to him. I don't know what it was about this book. I just really had no connection to the story or the characters, and I was just bored. There's nothing in particular I didn't like. I just had no feelings really towards it, and I generally enjoyed it, but no strong emotions there. So I gave it 3 stars. Perhaps I'll read it in the future and feel differently. But yeah. So the last book I have is actually the one I DNF'd. And I thought I'd save this for the last bit. But I don't rate books I DNF'd because I obviously don't finish them. But I will just mention it, like why I DNF'd it and stuff. And I'm actually kind of surprised I DNF'd this, or I ended up DNFing it, I guess. But it is Resurrection by Leo Tolstoy. This is a book about the prison and justice system in Russia in the 19th century, and I DNF'd it about 275 pages, so I only had about like 200 pages to go. But this book became really repetitive. It was just the same thing happening over and over, and I really hate to say that because I really have enjoyed all the Tolstoy I've read. I loved Anna Karenina, and I really liked the Kreutzer Sonata, and the parts of War and Peace I've read, but I really just couldn't get into it after the first 200 pages. It was weird because I really enjoyed the first 200 pages or so. It was really interesting. However, after that, it was just the same thing happening over and over, and I felt like I had kind of gotten the gist of what was going to happen. And yeah, for that reason I DNF'd it. I spent a long time trying to get through this, and I usually don't DNF books, but if I feel like I'm not going to get anything out of it if I continue, then I just DNF it. And yeah, I usually don't do that. This is the 3rd book I've DNF'd this year, so yeah, I don't usually do that, but I did it this month. So those are all the books that I read in August. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and enjoyed me kind of rambling about some of these books, especially Tess. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video.